Yeah, started.
Okay, so I'll just start. So, yeah, good morning, everyone, and thank you for taking out your time and joining today's session. So, today's topic for the event is AWS Lambda and how we can integrate it well with the MuleSoft system. Okay, so for your information, the session will be recorded for your future reference, and you can check out our YouTube channel and our Mysore Meetup group page if you're looking for any past recording. And the session is purely for a learning purpose, so feel free to interact during the session. And if you have any questions, you can unmute yourself and ask, or you can also put your question to the chat box. Okay. So let's move ahead and let's see the agenda for today's topic. So today we will like basically know what is AWS, okay, and why they are so much popular in cloud ecosystem. And in today's session, we will also going to see like what is Lambda function and how it works and why they have been exploded in popularity. Okay, we will also see what is API gateway here and what all are the different types of Lambda connectors available in MuleSoft. Okay, and we are basically going to see the use case followed by a demo, and then we are going to wrap up the session with the question answers. Okay, so before we start, let me introduce you all to the organizer of Mysore Meetup group. So we have Shubham Chaurasia, Giridhar Mika, and myself. Okay, so like feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions, suggestions, feedback. Okay, or you want to be a speaker, do let us know. Like we are there for you. So as you already know like for today's topic, like you have me and Shubham as a speaker. So let me start with my introduction. So here I am, Priya Shah, and I'm from Kolkata, and I'm currently working with LTI Mindtree as a senior software specialist. And prior to that, I have worked with Cognizant and TCS as well. So it's been over like 5+ years of experience into integration and IT. So I have majorly worked on IBM stack like IBM, BPM, App Connect, API Connect, Data Power, and then gradually moved towards the MuleSoft. Okay, and I'm a MuleSoft and IBM certified. Okay, now I'd like to hand over it to Shubham to speak about himself. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so a quick introduction. I'm a MuleSoft ambassador and currently working in Millennium. Okay, you can just stop on
Yeah.
that slide once.
Okay.
No, no.
Okay.
Yeah, so I have 4+ years of experience in integrations, and I am Salesforce, AWS, GCP, Azure certified. Okay, so let's move on to like how you can start it with AWS. So you can stop sharing. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So as you know, let me start with like where you need to start when you are working with AWS. Okay, so basically go to AWS console. Okay, so first of all, like you need to sign up, right? So basically you can search for like AWS console. Okay, and here you can
Shubham,
go
can
and
you maximize it? Like it is very
is it
slow.
not
Yeah,
visible?
yeah, it is visible. Like, can you maximize the font?
Okay, okay, let me try
Hmm.
it again. Give me 1 second. Shortcut is okay. Start sharing. Is it good?
Yeah, yeah. Hmm.
Okay, so basically you land on this page. Okay, here what you need to do, you need to sign up to basically use the AWS services. Okay, so here how would you sign up? Basically you land on this page and you create your account, AWS account. Okay, so you need to provide basically it provides a free tier account option. Okay, where you will get these 12 months free trial. Okay, and basically you need to provide your credit card, although they don't charge it for the first year, so you can provide and basically remove it when you are if you don't want to use it. Okay, so you create an account. Okay, by providing your email address and filling all these details. Okay, so at the end you need to provide your credit card details, so just be aware of that if you need to sign up for AWS. Okay, now let's move on to like when you will sign up and log in, you will land on this page, okay, like console page of AWS. So I'll just go here. So this is the AWS console home. Here you will find the list of services. As you can see that different domains like analytics, we have these services, and compute EC2 service, which is the most common service, most famous service of AWS. And then we have containers. Okay, all right. So we have database services. All these services are here. You can see there are 200 plus services of AWS. Okay, so now we will be looking at one of these services like AWS Lambda. So you can see that this is the service. So as you can see, there are multiple services. So some of these services are like a platform as a service. Some of these offerings are software as a service. So if you talk about AWS Lambda, it is a platform as a service. So we will be looking at uh, this service of AWS today. So you can see it says like run code without thinking about server. So it is basically a serverless offering where you don't need to manage your servers, and basically you will just need to write your code, and AWS will handle all your backend creation of resources like RAM and storage, etc. So before talking about AWS Lambda, I'll just quickly give you some tips about when you start with AWS. Okay, so first, if you need to like you can perform different operations in AWS through different ways. Like you have this UI option here, okay, where you can go to S3 Lambda by clicking here in the UI. Then another option is like you have this cloud shell option. Okay, so here you will need to run commands, and basically you can perform all the um, actions which you will be doing otherwise from the UI. Okay, then we have also AWS CLI option. Basically you need to provide your credentials, okay, like access key and secret key. Then you will be able to again access the AWS services through the CLI. Okay, so how do you get these credentials if you want to access them through CLI? Okay, so you can go to security credentials. Basically when you create your account, even when you create your account, you will get these credentials. Okay, so if you suppose you forget them, okay, so you can create them here. Okay, you can see that I have two access keys. So let me generate another. If let's say I forget it. Okay, so I think I don't I'm getting you see I'm getting the option of that you can have a maximum of two access keys. So I have created two, that's why I'm not getting access create access key option here. But let me delete this. Let me just verify which access key I'm using. Okay, JD. So I can delete this activation key. Okay, now I am getting the creation option of creating access key. So you can create this. Let's say I want to use it for command line interface, as I mentioned. Okay, so I'll just click on next, and I can provide tags. So basically tags are used for uh, collecting information to show uh, information along some points. Okay, so let's create access key. So you can see that I got the access key and the secret access key and secret access key. So you need to provide these values, these credentials, okay, when you need to uh, access AWS services using CLI, or even like when we will be using AWS through AWS connector, AWS Lambda connector. You need to provide these credentials. So you you need to save this secret access key because it will not be visible again. Okay, so if I just copy it and click on done, then it will not be visible again. Okay, so be careful that you can view it only once. So basically you need to store it somewhere. Okay, again like when you are running AWS services, you will be charged. Okay, right? So if you don't want to overcharge, sometimes you are running AWS services and you forget that you are running them, so you need to create some alerts, right, that you have overused your time, okay, like budgets. So you can go to like billing and cost management. So here you can create some alerts like budgets, that you have this amount of money, when you cross this amount of money, you want to be notified that yeah, this service is running out of range, out of budget. So you can those manage those information here, like everything you run here will be charged, right? So you can create those. But again, some points I need to mention here, that when you are using a trial account, okay, some of the services you are offered for free. Again, it is a limitation, like you can run only a limited number of hours those services in a trial account, okay. And also, for example, if you are using EC2 service, which is a compute service, so you need to be careful, like you can only use T2 micro instance um, for a limited amount of time, okay, in a month. So again, if you overrun it, we will be charged. So you can create those alerts here in the budgets, okay. So you can create a budget. So again, this is a point that you need to be careful when you are using AWS console, otherwise you will be charged, and you will be need to pay for it, okay. Now we can just move on to, okay, one more point I need to tell you, like if you are, let's say you sign up to AWS console, so you will be logged in as a root user, okay. As you can see that I am currently logged in as an IAM user. So a best practice is that whenever you create a account, okay, so it will be logged you will be logged in as a root account, but you should not use your root account. You should be using a IAM account, okay, for performing any activity, okay. So how do you create one? You go to IAM, okay. So basically it stands for identity and access management. So here you will manage your users, roles and policies, okay. Again, here you can create user. So basically you will click on create user and provide email ID, etc., all those details, and you can see that I have created these 5 users. So this is the IAM user that I am using. And again, you will create user and provide a limited number of credentials that the user need should be given access to, okay. So be careful of that as well, okay. You can see, you get when you will create IAM user, okay, when it is created, again you need to, when you will be logging in, let me show you, like AWS console login. Okay, here you see that you have two options to log in, like there is a root user and IAM user. When you created an IAM user, you need to select this option. So again, when you will be creating an IAM user, you will be creating an account ID, okay. So you can provide that account ID or account alias. For my case, like I am using this one, like my ID 535. So you can see that it is my account ID, and I will be creating IAM username and password, okay. So this is just basics of AWS, okay. Now Priya, you can start telling about AWS Lambda. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask meanwhile.
Okay. Okay, so now I will move forward and start with AWS Lambda introductions. So AWS Lambda is Amazon serverless computing system that runs code and automatically manages the underlying computing resources. Okay, so AWS Lambda is basically a compute service. Okay, that follows serverless architecture. So what does serverless architecture means here? Does it mean that we don't need any server to run our application? No, right? So we cannot run our application without server. Okay, so here serverless is basically like it is basically referring to the concept where the user or the customer does not need to do any server provisioning or also do not have to manage their infrastructure. Okay, so here everything will be managed and provisioned by the cloud provider. So in this case, AWS our cloud provider here, right? So they will be managing everything. So likewise, we have other like cloud provider also, okay, in the market, which are following the same serverless architecture. And just to name a few are like Google and Azure also. Okay, so you already now got to know about AWS offering, as Shubham explained. So we have several offerings like compute, database, storage, containers, right? So among these, like AWS Lambda is one of the service that falls under the compute domain of the services. Okay, so along with the EC2, like EBS, Amazon, Elastic Load Balancing. Okay, AWS Lambda is also a compute service that falls under the bigger umbrella of the compute service. Okay, so this Lambda function basically allows any code or any application or any backend system, to execute in a serverless manner. And all we need to do is like to supply our code, and Lambda will take care of everything. Okay. So here, like there are several languages. Okay. Which are supported by AWS Lambda. Okay, so while writing the code or the function, we can make use of Node.js, Python, Java, C Sharp, Go. Okay, all these languages to write our code, and these are supported by the AWS Lambda. Okay, so moving ahead, let's see like what all are the AWS Lambda features. So the first one is no worries about the servers. Okay, so as you already know, right, that Lambda automatically runs our code without requiring us to provision or manage our server. Okay, so we just have to write our code and upload it, and Lambda will basically take care of it. And here we are basically not even taking the overhead of managing our infrastructure, our scaling part, our storage, patching, or any security related things. Okay, here all the provisioning and management are basically done by the Lambda, and only thing that Lambda is basically expecting from us is that a piece of code if it should be working. Okay, other feature is automatic scaling. So Lambda basically scales automatically based on the your load or the volume of the data which it is receiving. Okay, so we do not even have to worry about the scaling. And here, like AWS Lambda basically scales our application, okay, by running the code um, in response to like each trigger. So whenever it scales, it basically runs our application parallelly and give a response to each of the requests precisely. Okay, other feature is metering on the second. So here, like billing in Lambda is also metered in second, and here we are only paying for the amount of time that our code is running. Okay, and we are not charged for anything else. So whatever server infrastructure is there, we are not paying for anything. Okay, so currently, like we are charged like for every 100 milliseconds, and this is just based on the number of triggers and how much your code is optimized to perform. Okay, so currently, like this offering makes AWS Lambda like very cheaper in the market. So if you are comparing it with the EC2 instance, right, which is the offering of AWS only, so there like we have to manage everything. So we have there, like you can say, more control over our infrastructure and on our like application management. But here, like in Lambda, like we are usually have less control. Okay, we just have control over our code, that's all. Okay, and other thing is here, like obviously we are not managing everything. Okay, it is just on the cloud provider side. So that is all about AWS Lambda feature. Okay, moving ahead. Okay, where is AWS Lambda used? So like there are several areas where AWS Lambda is widely used. Okay, and just to like tell you like one use case, okay, where it is used is like for AWS Lambda is used to process image when it is uploaded. Okay, so what happens, let's say like whenever an objects get uploaded to the S3 bucket. Okay, suppose it is uploaded in a format which is not supported by the other devices or the other systems. Okay, so what happens is like the moment uh, uh, image is getting uploaded to the S3 bucket in a raw format, AWS Lambda function is getting triggered. Okay, and the job of the AWS Lambda is to basically process that message, okay, in a specified format, and then to create a thumbnail based on the end based on the end system devices. So end system devices can be your laptop, your mobile, okay, your PC, anything. Okay, so based on the end system, it will basically convert and process the image. okay, into the specified format and into and with the thumbnail also. Okay, let's see the other use case. Okay, so other use case is where AWS Lambda is used to analyze social media data. So suppose we have a hashtag called trending data. Okay, and the data is basically like received from the social media side and getting feeded into the Amazon environment. Okay, and the moment it is getting feeded, like AWS Lambda function is getting like getting triggered. Okay, and what it is doing is like it is processing the huge volume of data and basically storing it into the database for the future use. Okay, so in that way, like there can be several use cases. So let me tell you like what all the companies basically using Lambda. So some of the companies which got tremendous benefits using Lambda are like Thomson, Benchling, Nordstrom, Coca-Cola, Robot. So all these companies are extensively using it and getting like a lot of benefits. Okay, so now moving ahead, like let's look at how Lambda works. In other words, like let's see like how this complicated function like behind the scene works in simple and seamless way. Okay, so suppose we have here a client which send a request. Okay, so this can be like any user or any application or it can be an Amazon web service that is sending the request to the Lambda. So Lambda is basically receiving the request. Okay, and based on the like what is the volume of the request, it will basically decide its container. So here if you'll see, like suppose it is sending a single request or a low volume of request, so single container will be sufficient enough to handle that particular request. Okay, but what is container here? Okay, so this container which you see here basically contains your piece of code which is provided by you to perform a specific logic, right? So if you already don't know about the container, then let me pause and tell you about the container. So it is basically a lightweight image. Okay, and you can consider it as a standalone like executable package which contains everything that is needed to run your application. Okay, it can be your runtime, your system tools, libraries, okay, all your settings, everything. Okay, so this container are like very useful because it basically like provides isolation between other applications. Okay, suppose you have a dev environment and staging environment, right? When we need those segregation to provide the isolation, in the same way container also provides some isolation. Okay, so if there are single requests, it will have a single container, but when the volume is more and a lot of like requests are coming to our AWS Lambda, it will like provision multiple container based on the number of requests, and it will handle all the requests parallelly. Okay, and like basically process and send the request to the specified container. Okay, and once the request is once you can say the hits are minimized or the requests are coming low in number, then it will automatically deprovision the containers as well. Okay, so in that way it basically manages entire services. And it also like makes our application more cheaper. Okay, because it scales based on the number of requests. Okay, but the best thing is like we do not have to worry anything how much how many container it is using or what is the provisioning it is doing, because we are just paying for the number of requests which we are getting which we are triggering. So now let's see like how we can create Lambda function in AWS console. Mm, okay, so I logged into AWS console. Okay, if you see here, so as you guys already know about like creating user and everything, so these users are needed because we will have to specify like if you're using Lambda function, then it should have all the accesses, right? So if you're creating user, at that time only like we are provisioning the appropriate access for the Lambda function also, so that we will be able to execute, deploy and test our Lambda functions. So Shubham already showed like how to create a user. So if we go to services and go to IAM, we can see several users are there, and those users have has also appropriate Lambda policies attached to access those Lambda functions. Okay, now let's quickly go to the Lambda and see like how we can create our Lambda functions. Okay, so we have to go to this Lambda function site, and then we'll have to click on create function. So there are like several templates also available to start with scratch. several templates like available, or you can also start from scratch here. So what I was talking about, like supports several languages, which you can see here, on which we can write our code. So let's create one functions. Okay, demo function. Okay, and we can just go with the default settings and click on create functions. So the moment we are creating function, right, our Amazon will create this flow, and it will deploy in the background as well. If you'll see this function, okay, we are directly getting option to test, because deploy has been already happened the moment we created the functions. Okay, so it will have the basic code already written. So if you want, we can directly run it and see how we can test it. So, okay, hello from Lambda, let's test and see like how it works. Okay, so we are not basically using this JSON. Okay, we can just invoke it and see like it is giving in response same body hello from Lambda. Okay, now if you want to see all this thing like how it is coming in the logs, then we have a CloudWatch log available and provided by the AWS, and this is basically a monitoring service of AWS. Okay, from where you can basically manage our logs, transaction, okay, health of the server, everything. Okay, we have a lot of options available, but just to see like the recent one which we triggered, we can check it from here, like how our transaction has passed and what was the execution time and everything. Okay, so in that way you can create a function. Suppose like let's create one more function where we will be basically accessing our JSON file. So suppose this is a request where we are sending country, and what we will do is like we will take this value from the JSON payload and we will concatenate with the string. Okay, so just to create this function, just a very simple function, let's say a demo function 2. Okay, and this time let's choose Python. We can choose any version. Okay, so let's go with this create function. So again, it is from the scratch which we are creating in Python language. Okay, so if you go to the code section, it will also have some auto generated code. But what we will do now is like let's just copy this function, because we want to implement this logic where we will concatenate the data from the JSON to this string. Okay, now let's deploy it. Okay, so now this time, instead of testing from the console, what I want to do is like I want to test it from the Postman. But how can we access this particular function from our Postman? Now let's look into it. Okay, so if we go to the PPT, we can see here, like we cannot directly access AWS Lambda function from our Postman directly, but we can access it via like Amazon API Gateway. So between your request and your response, there is a gateway or the proxy layer setting in between, which basically like allow or bypass your request. Okay, so just to create this API gateway, like I'll show you like how we can create this gateway. So for that, we will have to go to the services, and then we can see API gateway here. Okay, let's go there and we will quickly create API gateway. So once this layer is established, right, we will be able to trigger it from our Postman. So let's create an API. So this is, as we are making a HTTP call, we are going to build HTTP API, and then we'll have to click on integration. So here it can, like currently we are using Lambda, right, for our integration. So we'll be choosing Lambda, and then here we will have to provide the function, which function we want to call and for which function we want to create gateway. So let's choose demo function 2. Okay, and then we'll have to provide gateway API name. So I'll just give like this. Okay, next. And then what is the method which will be your Postman will be calling with? So it is a post method I'll be calling, because we are passing some payload. Okay, then click on next. So it will deploy to the stage environment, and here we call default. Okay, as our deployment stage. For deployment, we are basically deploying it to the default stage. Okay, it is the default one which is provided by the AWS. Okay, so the moment you will create this API gateway, right, you can see all these API related details here. So here you will also see some proxy URL for the gateway which they have provided. So we can just copy this URL, Along with that, we'll have to obviously provide our URI, right? Our resource which we want to trigger. So if we click on this post, this is the resource which we want to trigger. So let's give this. Okay. And now we have, as you already remember, right? We have already deployed our functions also. Let's quickly check whether it was deployed. Demo func 2 code. Yeah. So it is already deployed. So if there are no changes, it will be like, it will not allow you to redeploy. Okay. So now let's quickly send the request and see whether it is able to pass it or not. Message not found. Hmm. Okay, now let me first refresh it because we have added one gateway, right? So now in the overview, you will be able to see this gateway also present because we have added that gateway associating this functions. Okay, so now let's test again and see. Message not found.
So there is a space in the URL, I think, in the
Okay.
postman.
Yeah, yeah, correct. Thank you. Yeah, so you are able to see the response. Okay, so in that way we can access our functions, we can create functions and access it. Okay, and if you'll see, we have function arn also. So the every time we are creating function and deploying it, it will return some function arn. Okay, and this arn, with using which you can basically you can access functions. So that's all, like that's how we can basically play with the functions. Okay, moving ahead, like I would like to hand over it to Shubham so that he can showcase some demo as well with the toolkit. Okay, using AWS Lambda connectors. So yeah, any questions? I'll just stop share and take some questions if we have. Maybe network flash.
Hi, Priya. Good
Yeah,
morning. So
yeah,
I
yeah.
just want to know that you are creating the functions, right? There, can we group all the thing into one, or we need to create one by one?
Like
You can
currently, like,
you can create multiple functions. Okay, suppose you have I mean, you can create multiple functions, okay, and you can refer them using. There is a concept in AWS like layers, okay. So if you want to interlink them, you will be using AWS Lambda layers, okay. So and again, there is another point I would like to mention. Suppose there are some limitations of AWS Lambda, like size wise, that you can deploy a certain amount of size of package. Okay, so if your code is getting bigger, like you are including libraries and different references to different functions, so there is a limitation, right? But you can use layers to basically segregate them. Like you can include libraries in a different layer, and basically in the main function you can refer them to that layer. Okay, so in that way you can basically make a workaround to include that code, right, which is huge in size, a package which includes libraries, okay, and is going out of limitation of AWS, so AWS Lambda function. So this way you can include certain packages. Okay, now let's, does that you answers your question?
Yeah, Shubham. Okay, thank you.
Okay, now I will tell you how we can integrate MuleSoft with AWS Lambda. Okay, so we have a connector available. Okay, you can see that we have a connector AWS Lambda. Okay, and basically it is not present by default. You need to add.
Shubham, can you like it is like very small in font.
Okay, let me see.
By any chance, you can maximize it.
What's the shortcut for this? Control.
Mhm.
Okay, let me try sharing this only. Then it will be visible properly. Okay,
So, what
it should
is
be,
the size of your desktop, Shubham?
it should be good now.
Not that better still.
Okay. Is it like too small?
Yeah. Like, what about others? Uh,
Yeah, yeah, Shivam, it is small. Can you zoom it?
Okay, okay, let me change. Try to change the resolution. 1 second. Okay, settings. It is in 4K. That's why let me take it. This one. Keep changes. Okay, it should be good now. Share screen. Touch screen. How about now?
yeah, yeah, better. Very good.
Okay, so we were talking about like if you need to add this connector to your Mule palette, you can search in Exchange and search for AWS Lambda. So you can just install that, and you will have these all these functionalities available. Okay, so first I want to give you some points related to what we discussed, right? Okay, so what we discussed, like we discussed about AWS Lambda functions, right? So we created all these functions. So let's say we go to this function. Okay, we created this code. Okay, so as you can see, this is a simple code. Okay, and here are, you can see there are trigger option. Okay, and again, we why we included API gateway as a trigger. Suppose we want to execute this from public internet, right? Like sending a request, we wanted to execute it in the default scenario. We were just testing it by clicking on test and passing this event and click on test. Okay, so it was executing fine, but we want to like call this function, right, from some other external party, from third party services, right? So this way, that's why we included API gateway as a trigger. So what this did basically, it exposed our Lambda function as an API, okay, to the public, so that we can call it. So in this scenario, now we have exposed our URL. So whenever someone triggers the request, it goes to the API gateway, okay, that request, and then API gateway passes or forwards this request to this Lambda function, and it gets executed. Okay, so again, there are many triggers available. Suppose you don't want to expose it externally, you just want some other AWS service to execute it, then you can see there are multiple AWS services that you can provide access to, and they can execute this AWS Lambda function. Suppose you are building some integration, for example, whenever someone uploads some object to S3, you need to execute this function on that particular object. So you can in create some integration like this. Okay, like you can point out this S3 as an trigger. Okay, so these are there are different ways you can, different types of integrations you can do with this Lambda function. That's why like it is very popular. So different services can use the functionality of this Lambda function and can make some code changes, some functionality. Okay, now coming back to like integration with AWS Lambda along with MuleSoft. So we are talking about these functions available to us. Okay, so you can see there is one function like get function. Basically, this what this will do, it will, you need to provide like function name, okay, and qualifier. So qualifier is basically a version. Okay, like you, it is a version. So see, we have executed I mean, we created code, right? So now let's say we wanted to update it. Okay, so basically what we are doing, we are creating another version of this code. Okay, so when we will make some changes, okay, let's say I did this change and I wanted to now make it available to the public, right? So this is the next version of this code. So what I will do, what I will deploy this change. Okay, now I will publish this new version. Okay, I will call it new version, or I can provide a number. Okay, v2. So this thing, this alias or the version, you can see this is the version 3 now. Okay, so that value we need to provide here. Okay, qualifier. So if you don't provide, it will take the default version. Okay, so what this function is basically doing, it will fetch the details of this function. Okay, again there is basically you will mostly use this invoke function. Okay, because you will be you can execute a Lambda function, okay, uh, from here, from this connector. So suppose I want to execute this function, um, like let's say deploy function test, okay. So let's say I want to execute this. So I will provide this function name here, okay. You can see that I need to provide function name. You can, again, these values are not no required qualifier, so you can remove this. And if you want to execute a particular version of the code, like, right, so I created version 2, then I can pass that value. If not, then it will execute the default. Then we have these options available, like invocation type. So here you can see there are three options, okay. So if you use the request response option, okay, then what it will do, it will execute in a synchronous manner, okay. Like it will wait for their response, it will wait for the function's response, and then it will pass the response. But now let's say if you want to execute it asynchronously, you can use this event function, okay. So basically it will just pass that event to the whatever message, whatever input we are passing, and it will invoke the function and will not give the response, okay. Then we have like log type and client context option. So you can see that there is a tail option, and basically what it does is, basically, if you will set it to tail, it will pass the output value, okay, like information of the output in the log as well, okay. So that it is that point. And then you need to pass the body, okay. So body, now let's discuss about the body. So whatever input you need to provide, okay, to execute this Lambda function, you need to provide it in the body, okay. So let's talk about this function which we are going to execute, okay. So I will go here. I'm calling the my example API option, okay. So let's make this synchronous function, and I will go to make you understand about this function, okay, my example API. So here the code tells you that you need to provide, uh, again, it is a Python code. If you understand Python, it is saying like, we need to pass country. We will be taking country from that JSON event, and we will print it, okay, like print it. And again, we are just returning the message, although we are not taking any uh, no input from the payload. We are just passing the message. So if I will execute this, okay, let me run this code and I'll show you. So this endpoint is, if I go to listener slash function, okay. See, if I execute this function, you can see it instantly passed me the response, I love my country, okay, which is like, which is what we are expecting, okay. Again, we can take the input, like for example, we can take this body, like what we are invoking. See, this is an input. We can make use of this input as well. Like for example, we are making use of this in here, right, this function. So if I change this, okay, not this, yeah, this function, like let's say, okay. So you can see that if I pass this message, it is taking input from this country only, okay. So if I show you this code, again, it is a just all example of like writing how you write your code, okay. So if I go to this function and go to code, you can see that I am taking input from the body, and then body is basically our payload, and then we are taking the country and saving it to data, and just passing message I love plus data. So whatever values in the country key, we are getting that only, okay. Like I love message and the value, okay. So this is what we are getting. Again, there is one more functionality, like list functions. So basically it will list all the functions available in your like region, okay. Like for example, if you here you have multiple options, right, that you which again, you can see that there is a region option. So if you want, these functions are regional. Okay, for example, if you create one function in US East 1, it will not be visible to US East 2. Okay, so if you provide these, it will basically fetch the functions from that particular region. If you don't provide this value, it will fetch all the functions. Okay, so if I execute this code, let me check the endpoint. Okay, you can see the different functions that we have. You can see, if I search, like, let's search our function name. Okay, you can see this is the function name that is available to us, that we created. Then we have, I think, hello world. So basically it is giving all the functions and their information about them, like the function deploy, function test is there. It is, their runtime is Python, and the version is $latest, which is basically the version which is most recently deployed. Okay, the package type is zip. Okay, all these functions is there, and again the function arn. So with these with this connector, we can get basically the information about the functions that are available. Okay, so this is all about like all the functionalities that is available to us. And again, there is another invoke async function. So suppose you just want to invoke the function and do not get the response. Okay, like let's say we talk about batch processing, right? So here we need to you execute just the, I mean, just trigger the batch, right? Then we can use the async function. So the code about the batch function, you will need to write in this Python code. Okay, like let's say you are transforming or doing some batch functionality, right, where you don't need the response. Then you can create that function and basically call that function using async, invoke async functionality of this connector. Okay, so I think that this was about the AWS Lambda connector. Okay, and let me share once more. Can you share yeah, that slide,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
the use cases? So now we will discuss about the some of the possible use cases. Okay, now, I mean, you looked at like AWS Lambda introduction and how we need to use them, but now you may ask, like, how, why will we need to use AWS Lambda instead of like directly using MuleSoft? So we can, again, there are multiple possibilities, like where we can, where we require to use AWS Lambda. Can you
Mhm.
share your screen? Yeah.
Yeah, Shubham, before that, like, did you show that look, Lambda connectors, uh, what you have added in that connector? I don't remember if you showed
One second. Yeah, I think I can show one more thing.
the configuration. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, that point. Yeah. So here I forgot to explain. Like there is the connector configuration when you are doing. So you need to provide this access key and secret key which we generated, right? So that value you need to provide here. Okay. And again, this is again just as I mentioned, that is, this is a regional service, so you need to provide your region as well. Okay. So here I provided US East 1 because we are working on US East 1 region. See, if I go to AWS Lambda, see this region changed to a particular region, US East 1. So some services are like, for example, IAM is a global service, so you are seeing only global here. But if you talk about AWS Lambda, it is a regional service. That's why like there are regions showing. So if I switch to another region, these functions will not be available. See, so that's why you need to provide your region as well here. Okay, now you
Hmm.
can share the screen. So I will talk about some of the use cases now. Just a quick okay, so you can see that we can, some possible use cases of AWS Lambda integrating with MuleSoft are like augmenting data processing pipelines, asynchronous processing. Suppose we want to do some asynchronous task. Okay, again, you would say, why not write the code in MuleSoft rather than writing the code in AWS Lambda? So see, as we mentioned that AWS Lambda is a serverless code, right? So suppose you want to execute a task that can take, that runs only sometimes, right? Like, so for that you should not run servers that are huge in size, right? For example, if you have a request that takes only 1 MB of memory or 1 second to execute, you should not be running instance, right? A server with GBs of memory storage, multiple storage, a huge storage, right? So with this AWS Lambda functionality, our function will execute only when it is required. So we will only pay for the time our code is executed, right? We will not pay for the idle, for the server running idle, right? So this is one of the like required understanding of why we are using Lambda function, okay, instead of executing our code on MuleSoft servers only, okay. I hope this clears the point, like why we should use AWS Lambda functions. Okay, you can scroll to the next slide. So again, these are some of the functionality use cases that I have mentioned. You can read out them. We will attach the slide. Okay. Now let's talk about some of the limitations. Okay. So this is not like one stop solution. So there are some limitations of AWS Lambda as well. So for example, this space is limited to 500 MB. So if you are executing some code that requires space, so that requires space basically more than 500 MB, that function is not, then AWS Lambda function is not meant for that. Okay. Then memory, your see, when you are executing code, that code will run on some memory, right? So there is a limitation to that as well, that it can vary from 128 MB to 3 GB. Okay. Then there is an execution time. So if your function takes 20 minutes to execute, right? So let's say you are running some code that takes input from various services and it takes more than 15 minutes, then Lambda function is not the solution, because it can only run for 15 minutes. After that it will throw some error. Okay. Then again, which the point we talked about, like package size. Where can you unmute? Just click on mute. Oh, yep. Yeah, so as I was telling, like the size of deployment package, it can be only 250 MB. But if you want to, again, if your package is a bigger size, you can make use of AWS Lambda layers. Okay, so your libraries will be deployed in a different layer, and your code will be running in a different layer, which can help you with this solution. Okay, and request response body event can be a maximum of 6 MB. So your input payload basically can be a maximum of 6 MB. Okay. So these are the limitations which you need to take care of. Okay. Let's see if we have any questions. Is there any authentication mechanism which can be implemented on AWS API Gateway? Yes. So we can implement authentication. Okay, there are multiple services of AWS that provides this functionality. Even in AWS API Gateway, we get the options of authenticating the user. Okay, so AWS services like AWS Cognito can help you with that, like authenticating the user. Okay, for as of now, like we were directly calling the API and we were directly getting the response, right? But we because we made the API open. Okay, but if you can secure it, okay, so that does that answers your questions? Okay, meanwhile, I will take question from Sagnik. What is the difference between invoking asynchronous functions using a invoke async and invoke with setting? Okay, so I think earlier when AWS Lambda connector was available, there were only two or three functions. Like the AWS invoke async function was not there. So they recently released, I think, the function that there is not much difference between these uh, settings, like setting, I mean, calling invoke async separately and then passing, I mean, setting the value of X Amazon AMZ invocation type to event. So I think they will both do the same functionality. So that, does that answer your question? I mean, I'm not sure, but basically, I will. You can check for it. What is the benefit of using Lambda connectors over the HTTP request connector? So if you are talking about like, see, uh, when we are using connector, and again when we are using a HTTP request, right, to call the AWS Lambda. So if you're, I don't think there is a benefit. There are different ways. Okay, so I will say, like, if you will execute from using the connector, the request is basically executing without exposing our function to the public. Okay, so it makes it secure rather than exposing it to the public through the API gateway. Okay, that is one benefit that I can think of over using like Lambda connector over the HTTP request. And again, one point to remember that when you are executing the code with HTTP request, and when you are using the request, I mean, when you are executing the AWS Lambda code through the connector, you have to write different codes, because see, it expects a different type of input when you are passing it through the body and when you are passing it through the connector. So be mindful of that as well. Okay, that there is a different way of writing the code when you are passing requests through those two ways. Okay, okay, got it. We try to use both ways with similar results, and docs don't say much on this. Yeah. So any other questions? If any changes in AWS Lambda function, deploy the function in AWS to automate this process. See, first of all, like when you are deploying, let me share the screen. Let's try to answer this. If any changes in AWS Lambda function, deploy the function in AWS, update the version value in MuleFlow as well. Is there any way to automate this process? Okay, I think you can always create an automation process for this. First of all, like I will explain. Let's say you created this function, okay, and you updated to it another version. Okay, now when you will do this, you can create a notification. Okay, again, this is a kind of a complex way of doing this, that it will pass whenever you do a change in this functions version, it will pass a basically a trigger to the AWS SNS notification. Okay, then what we will do, basically we will be listening that notification in SNS. Okay, I mean in MuleSoft. And so the version is updated, we get that value from that Amazon SNS notification, and then we update that in the invoke function value. Okay, that is one way of doing it. Okay, so again, there could be different ways of updating or automating this function version in the mule flow. So yeah, again, what I was going to tell, that when you are updating some version, right, you just click on deploy and it is deployed instantly, and you will find the code like working, another version of the code working instantly. So this is like how fast this AWS Lambda function is. Okay, when you are doing this thing in mule, right, so you need to deploy your code and run deploy in server. It will run all, it will take time like 10-15 minutes to package everything, and so this way AWS Lambda function is fast when you want to execute small functions. Okay, so this is like the difference why you want to use Lambda function rather than using implementing that same functionality in MuleSoft. Okay, any other question? Okay, thank you. Okay, I think I'll wait for 1 more minute, then we can close the question. We can close the session. Retest.
Yeah, and from the participant, like whoever are interested speaking in our Mysore Meetup group, do let us know. Uh, so it will be a great opportunity for you as well as for the uh, like community as well to learn from you. So yeah.
Yeah, that's correct. So what I was going to tell, that you can even you know uh, sign up for AWS Community Builders program as well. So basically, some benefits of using, I mean, uh, adding getting added to that program is that, like, you will get a chance to get a certification, okay, for free, and also some AWS credits to try out these AWS services, okay, which are paid. Show use case slide again. So yeah, you can you share
Yeah, yeah. And before that, like we have one more question, I think.
we will be uploading this slide. Can you go to the use case, because I think he wants to see the use case
Okay.
slide. So we will be attaching this slide to the to our page. You can just view it later, okay, for reference. Let me pass this. So just within 24 hours we will upload the recording, okay, and also the PPT. So just visit the meetup page, okay, where from where you have joined, you will find these recordings, okay, and even in our YouTube page we have provided the link here. You can find the recording, okay. um any other question if you would like to ask, related to AWS, or even not related to AWS as well, related to MuleSoft? Thanks, Gopal. I'll just stop the recording.